Now, it would be advisable to carry a fire extinguisher, but in lots of cases, people have fire extinguishers in their car and do not realise this. One of the extinguishers I always use, and I do purposely take 3 cans of beer with me. Now, with 3 cans of beer, and I just have them in the front of the car, even up on the dashboard. Many times you see me driving around, you'll see a can of beer on the dashboard of a car. These are one of the best fire extinguishers you can get. It's CO2 and gas. By being in the front of the car, they're hot or warm all the time, and just get hold of this can, shake it very vigorously, open it, just pull the ring open a little bit, and it will squirt just the same as a fire extinguisher and put the fire out. When I told a friend of mine about using cans of beer for a fire extinguisher, he thought this was a marvellous idea. And now when he goes bush, he says to his wife, well love, I've only got to go and get 2 dozen fire extinguishers and I'm on my way.
Rewind to 1988, when having a tinny on the dash was a recommendation from a bush survival expert on ABC Radio.
And most fires occur in a car. Somebody drops a cigarette down in the seating of the car.
Times have changed. I want you to think of a big family of TV men. It'd include Albie Mangles and Malcolm Douglas, maybe Steve Irwin and the Leyland brothers, then Les Hiddens and Harry Butler. One of their brothers in that family would be Jack Absalom, a Renaissance bushie. He's a shooter, a painter and desert survivalist who seemed to embody a quintessential Australian masculinity that was yearned for by TV producers.
250,000 square kilometres of desert, the land of no trees, the Nullarbor Plain. This was the place where painter Jack Absalom was born, and Jack Absalom is my guest this morning.
No, Carolyn Jones from 1981. Actually, he's my guest on Off Track, because Jack Absalom is still roaming around Australia.
Everything just the same, love. I'll be 90 on Saturday, and I just do everything just the same. I've got a 4-wheel drive that I pull a caravan with. I got a 22-foot caravan, and we go to an area. I go like to the Hammersley Ranges or the Flinders Ranges or wherever it is, and I stop there for 3 to 6 months and paint that area.
Possibly no other group of painters in this country are better known than those from Broken Hill. They're known as the Bushmen of the bush. The 5 of them have exhibited very successfully in Australia and overseas, and their paintings hang in some of the world's major galleries. Of the 5 Bushmen of the bush, we have 4 in the studio today. The 5th, Pro Hart, couldn't be with us, he's overseas. Welcome to John Pickup, Hugh Schultz, Eric Minchin and Jack Absalom, the Bushmen of the bush.
Of course, we can't really know what made him more famous, his career as a bushie or a brushie. But how was it that he was both of these things, a real-life Crocodile Dundee before Crocodile Dundee was a twinkle in a producer's eye, as well as exhibiting in London with Pro Hart? The answer to this question taps into something central to Jack Absalom. He's a self-styled, self-made man, and confidence was his way of life. And that sort of attitude has driven all of Jack Absalom's endeavours, including becoming an author. In fact, 2016 was the 40th anniversary of the publication of Jack Absalom's Safe Outback Travel, and his qualification for writing it came from no university.
See, well, I've lived in the bush all my life. I can go back to when I was 4 years of age when we first went into the bush. We lived in a little railway siding called Narita on the western sides of the Nullarbor Plains in Western Australia. And most of my playmates were all Aboriginal children, and I used to go with them, hunting, for a better word. We'd catching lizards and rabbits and all this sort of thing. And that's where it all started from. And years later, I was travelling through the outback and I found this family with a husband and wife and 3 children. And they were to the stage where they're tongues were swelling up, choking them.
It was a scene that was remade at the start of one of the TV documentaries that Absalom made in the late 80s, called The Road to Survival.
And this chap had got a bright idea, we won't go that way, we'll cut across here towards Lake Eyre.
Oh, what have we got?
And he was the luckiest bloke in the world that I happened to come along.
We near a town?
Back that way. Maybe there's a homestead up ahead.
Don't you know what's wrong with it?
That was so delicate that I was 4 hours just bathing them, putting squeezes of water in their mouths and everything without, you got to be careful that you don't give them a glass of water or something like that, they'll go into a coughing fit and choke. Anyway, when I got him back, I blew hell out of this bloke. And he was a Sydney solicitor. I said to him, why didn't you go and get a book on how to travel in the outback safely? For God's sake, this is terrible. Anyway, he said, look, I tried everywhere and I couldn't buy a book. So I rang up when I got home, I rang a firm in Adelaide and I said, look, I want a book on how to travel safely in the bush. And this chap who I'd known for years, he said, Jack, there's none. I said, what? He said, there's not a book on that. So I sat down and in 10 days I wrote Safe Outback Travel.
Isn't this marvellous? To be alone in such a landscape as this. It's something I feel that every Australian should have the opportunity of doing, because this is unique. But beneath all that beauty, there is the harshness. It's part of the beauty. But you must constantly be aware, if you want to travel this outback of Australia, that there can be danger.
Anyway, that book sold thousands and thousands of copies every year for 40 years. But last year I've just pulled it off the market simply because the mechanics in it today don't exist. There's no distributors and no carburetors and those sort of things. Everything today is you need a giant machine to hook it up to the car to tell you what's wrong with it.
I believe that any car made for Australian conditions, you must have at least 3 alternative ways of starting it. Now, I believe every car should have a crank handle. I hate using the things, but it's nice to know that you've got one behind the seat if you ever had to use it. But right, suppose we have a flat battery, suppose we have no crank handle. I'm going to show you how to crank that car using the back wheel. Now, what I want you to do is to...
But we got to be fair that the cars today, very seldom does anything go wrong with them. Like you can travel from here to Alice Springs or Darwin and not see a car broke down. In my days when I started 30 and 40 and 50 years ago, I might have passed 25 or pulled 20 out of bogs, and that doesn't happen today.
Have you integrated some new technologies into your life? Because these days people, for example, just rely completely on their GPS.
Yes, well, you can rely on your GPS, but it's the safest way is nature itself.
I feel one of the weaknesses in people from the city going to the bush is not taking notice of which direction the road is going that they are travelling on. One of their biggest failings, they get turned around very easy, spun around I call it. But now, we need a compass. We can make a compass out of a nail or a screwdriver, a piece of wire.
Can it be any bit of wire?
No. I misled you here, Colin.
So has nature ever gotten it wrong or led you astray, though? Have you ever come a gutser?
Not really. I've made mistakes at times, done stupid things. I had a combi van one time and it had a stupid jack. that you stood on the side and you had to put it went into a little square on the side of the car. I loosened all the nuts on the wheel. I'd got a puncher, and I jacked it up with this, and when I looked at it, it was crooked. And I put my hand on the top of it and kicked the bottom to level it up, and the whole truck fell on my hand on top of the jack. So here I am, pinned with me hand on the top of the jack with the car on top of it. And me eldest son, he was only 4 at the time, he was with me, and I'm saying to him, pull that wood around there for Dad. There was a pole there near me, any piece of wood. And I thought I'd get this in behind and might be able to lever it away. And it got to the stage at the finish that I was almost in the stage to cut my hand to get it out. And I said to him, I said, look, get Daddy the gun, get Daddy the gun. So he gets the gun, and I puts the barrel in behind, put my hand on, put my feet up on the side of the truck and pulled, and it came away enough for me to get my hand out. Well, I laid there for half an hour. I couldn't move. I was that bucket, and my hand was about, instead of being, say, 4 inches wide, which it is, it was 8 inches wide, where I'd squashed it all out. That was about the worst one I've ever done. Stupidity on my part. Completely stupidity.
Jack Absalom from the past.
If I have a claim to anything, I'm a reasonably good bushman.
And the present.
No worries, love.
Is my guest on Off Track. It was 1988, the bicentennial year, and ABC Radio put together a series called Absalom's Outback, where the audience received helpful life advice on how to repair a leaking petrol tank with soap and bulldust, how to use a can of beer as a fire extinguisher, and how to carry guns safely in a car.
Being a professional kangaroo shooter for 15 years, I've had a lot to do with rifles. And having something like 60-odd chaps working for me at the height of all this, all of them shooters, I've had a lot to do with how people behave. And none of my chaps ever had an accident because we had very, very strict rules, the things you must do in a car. And one of the foolish things is that you'll often have a car with, say, 2 people in the front and 2 in the back. And apart from the driver, everybody got a gun in his hand. Now, this is extremely dangerous. You look at the 2 people in the back for the start off. If the road's a bit rough, sitting on the front of their seat with their hands hanging onto the back of the seat, with the rifle barrel clenched in one of these, and have a look where the rifle barrel is. It'll be probably tickling the back of the driver's neck. And I will only allow 1 rifle in use in the car, and it must be in the front. The bloke sitting in the front with me, he can have the rifle. The barrel must be pointed down to the floor. Now, if it should go off, which if it's my way, it's an impossibility, but if it should, say, can blow a hole in the bottom of the floor, I won't worry about that. But I do object to rifles laying on the seat, tickle me in the ribs as I go along, and a bloke looking to see if he's got the safety catch on. Very, very, very foolish and dangerous.
Do you still travel with a gun these days?
No, I handed all the guns in. I haven't got any. I regret it now. I still should have a gun in the bush because everybody that works in the bush, I don't say people just travelling through the bush, but works in the bush like I do, should have a gun. For safety reasons, to get something to eat, to signal to people and things like that.
And on that, have you noticed now in your travels that indeed there are more or less travellers out in the bush than there used to be?
Oh, no, there's 10 times, 1,000 times more in the bush now than there ever was. And most people, when they first go into the bush, they go in with a little bit of apprehension. I'll tell you another little weird story. I pulled into the three ways. This is the other side of Alice Springs, where you can turn off and go into North Queensland. And there was a chap there looking to the left, looking to the right, and I said to him, "What's the problem?" He said, "I don't know whether to go on or stop here." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I wouldn't get to the next caravan park before dark." I said, "Why do you got to get to the caravan park before dark?" He said, "Oh, I wouldn't camp out in the bush." "Oh, just wouldn't do that." I said, "Why wouldn't you?" He said, somebody might attack me or rob me. I said, "Don't be stupid." I said, "Look, I'm going, and we're heading up towards Camberwell." And I said to me, "You come with me." At about 4:45, here I see, about a half a mile off the road, one of these towers they have for messages, one tower to the next tower. And there's always a good road going out to them. Anyway, when we get there, I pulled out 2 chairs, so-and-so, and I went and got a bottle of whiskey, and I said to the bloke, "Here, sit down there, here, have a drink." And I give him a drink and that. And he's stunned. He said, "Do you always camp like this?" I said, "Yeah, of course." And he's walking, after this, he's walking around, just looking at the trees and looking at the sky and looking at everything. I said, "How long you been travelling?" He said, 6 weeks. And he said, "I would have never done this in a million years." I said, "Haven't you enjoyed tonight?" He said, "This is the best night I've ever had." All he's been doing is going around Australia, racing from one caravan park to the next caravan park, which is stupid. Like, have a look at the bush. Have a look where the birds are and what the birds are doing on this waterhole and so forth, and see if you can catch a fish there.
The one thing that Jack Absalom says you must carry when you're travelling in the outback is a pack of cards. Why?
Yes, well, years ago, I was out working one night and I see this light in the bush, and I drive across, and it was Jack Dixon by a big campfire. Anyway, we get talking. He said, "What do you think's the most important thing in the bush?" And I said, "Oh, Jack, it'd have to be water." "Yeah," he said, "that's pretty important." He said, "But really," he said, "the most important thing I think's a pack of cards." And I said, "A pack of what?" He said, "A pack of cards." I said, "What sort of cards?" He said, "Ordinary playing cards." I said, "You've got to be joking." He said, "No." He said, "Look, you have trouble in the bush and something goes wrong," he said, "if you just get the tucker box out, sit down quietly, and you start playing patience," he said, "I will guarantee you that," he said, "within 10 minutes, some bloke will poke his finger over your shoulder and say, 'Hey, mate, that red Jack goes on that black 10. Of course, then you ask him for help."
Jack Absalom is full of stories big and small, and maybe it was his story collection that was part of what made him irresistible to broadcasters. In 1996, Absalom spoke with Kevin Norton on ABC Radio about how the television programs he made actually first came about, and apparently it started with a phone call.
He said, "I'd like to speak to Jack Absalom." I said, "Just speak to him." He said, "Jack, this is the ABC here." And Jack, he said, "We're going to do a TV series. We want you to do it." And I said, "What are you talking about?" "You know, you've seen Harry Butler in the Wild series." I said, "Yeah, I think they're marvellous." He said, "Well, we want you to do that." I said, "What on?" He said, "Don't tell me you haven't got something to say." And I thought for a second, I said, "I've got plenty to say." And I'm stunned. I'm walking out, I can't believe all this thing. And I decided to do them on all the animals and that we'd brought into this country. It took them 2 by 2, like horses and camels and goats and donkeys and pigs and rabbits and this sort of thing. So I stirred the whole of Australia up because I showed you the animals we brought in, how they should have never been brought in this country, totally unsuitable for the country. They were European exotic animals that didn't fit into our system, the damage they do and what we can do about it. So I stirred so much trouble up that I then get invited to speak to the press club in Canberra. And one time, just while on that, I drove this chap around and I showed him something like 13,000 kangaroos on Mullyungry Station, and he said to me, "There's not as many here as you thought." I said, "Yes, there's a lot more than that." I said, "How many sheep did you see?" He said, "I never seen any." I said, "Well, there's 40,000 of them, at least."
1980, Jack Absalom, professional kangaroo shooter and Bushman of the bush, addressed the National Press Club about kangaroo population. It was, perhaps, the height of his fame and influence in Australia.
Mr. Absalom, Jan Hodgkinson from the Canberra Times. In that series for the ABC, you made some points about the damage that introduced animals had done to inland Australia. Could you perhaps expand on that a little for us?
Yes, most certainly. I believe that we in Australia have been very, very careless. We tore into Australia with European exotic animals without thought of consequence of what would happen. Very few people realise that the topsoil in the inland of Australia, on an average, is between 9 inches to a foot thick. No more than that. But I believe that the hard-footed animal that we have today, like sheep, cattle, donkeys, pigs, brumbies, are chopping this whole country up, and the wind is blowing it away. 40% of the inland is gone, and it's gone forever. It'll never come back. This is why I came out so strongly on that TV program. Because I want people to listen. Because I want people to listen. This is what we've inflicted on this country. This is what we've inflicted on this country. Our children are going to curse the day that they ever let us loose here. But perhaps it's not too late to do something. That's what I say about that.
Do you reckon over all of these years of travelling and painting and working in the outback that your relationship with the outback has changed?
Never, never, never. I always treat the outback as it should be treated. I'm a great admirer of nature. I love nature. I have a big collection of opal. Nature made all that. I can get a piece of opal and look at that. We cannot do that. We could not do what nature's done.
Do you reckon you've had a lucky life?
You've got a good warm swag, you've got no problems.
Something about a campfire, isn't it?
I reckon I've been very lucky all my life.
I bring many people out in the bush, and often the way they behave, they must think I'm nuts. Because often I say to them, have a look at that. And they say, what? I said, that. And it might be a red sandhill with an old dead tree in it or something. They say, but there's nothing there. I say, but look at the colours. Oh. And it might be just a gibber plane going away forever. And they're expecting, I think, to see a motel or a house or something. And because there's nothing, they said, but there's nothing there. But I said, that's what makes it so attractive. And they look and they think, oh, he's got to be nuts. But I love all this. I think this is something.
Jack Absalom still travels the outback. He still paints, and he still tells stories as much as he ever did, though perhaps not quite to that huge audience that he once commanded. You can visit Jack Absalom in his gallery in Broken Hill, and you can see some pictures online at the Off Track website, abc.net.au/offtrack.